Hello everyone, welcome to Study with Sri. From today I start a new series that is Environment by Shankar IAS Academy and start from part 5 that is Act and Policies. This chapter is too long so I will make videos in part wise. Moving forward to part 1 of this chapter. So the first act under the Acts and Policies is Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. India is the first country in the world to have made provision for the protection and conservation of environment in its constitution. So India is the first country in the world to have made provision for the protection and conservation of environment in its constitution. We know that we celebrate 5th June as the World Environment Day. So the reason behind choosing the 5th June is on 5th June 1972, in the UN Conference of Human Environment in Stockholm, environment was first discussed as an item of international agenda. So we celebrate 5th June as World Environment Day. Soon after the Stockholm Conference, our country took substantive legislative steps. That our country took some steps which make laws regarding environmental protection. So first law is the Environment Protection Act 1972, followed by Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974, Forest Conservation Act 1980, Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981, subsequently Environment Protection Act 1986. So I am telling a mnemonics to remember this in chronological order. So first wildlife means animal. Animal पीते क्या है? Water रहते कहाँ हैं? Forest में. Forest क्या provide करता है? Air. So air अगर अच्छा provide होगा तो environment का अच्छा ही होगा. So and date you should remember as 24016, 1972, 1974, 1980, 1981, 1986. So moving forward to the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So the passing of Wildlife Act of 1972 constitutes an important landmark in the history of wildlife legislation in the country. First, it is the first act to constitute, and next, this is because the fact that forest including wildlife was then a state subject. So at the time of 1972, both forest and wildlife were a state subject. Now forest is in concurrent list and then forest was in state subject. So following entry 20 list 2 of 7 schedule that is state subject schedule. So Parliament had no power to make law on the same except as provided in Article 249, 250, 252 of the Constitution. Having regard to the importance of the matter, the Act has been adopted by all the states except that of Jammu and Kashmir. So at the time of 1972, Jammu and Kashmir was under Article 370 Jammu and Kashmir में लागू था. But after 2019, we know that 370 imposed नहीं होता है अब. तो having regard importance of the matter, the Act have been adopted by all state and all the union territory. And the operation of the act is mandatory in union territory and all state. Okay. Next is Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 provides the basic framework to ensure the protection and management of wildlife. Very important that Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 provides the basic framework to ensure the protection and management of wildlife. The act was amended subsequently 1982, 1986, 1991 and 1993. So first 1982, then 1986, then 1991, then 1993 to accommodate the provision for its effective implementation. So the rationale for passing act as stated in its statement of objects and reasons are as follows. So what is logic behind passing this act? First is the rapid decline of India's wild animals and birds. One of the richest and most varied wildlife resource of the country has been a cause of grave concern. So we know that the declination of wild animals and birds was so rapid. So one of the richest and most varied wildlife resource of the country has been caused grave concern. So we should give our concern to them. Next is areas which were once teeming with wildlife have been become devoid of it. Even thus, in the sanctuaries and national parks, the protection afforded to wildlife needs to be improved. It means that areas जो एक टाइम में एनिमल्स से भरे हुए थे वो धीरे धीरे खाली होते जा रहा है. And even in sanctuaries and national parks, the protection afforded to wildlife needs to be improved. नेक्स्ट इज द वाइल्ड बर्ड्स एंड एनिमल प्रोटेक्शन एक्ट ऑफ 1935 जो था वो कंप्लीटली आउटडेटेड हो चुका था. ओके, सो दिस एग्जिस्टिंग लॉज नॉट ओनली हैव बिकम आउटडेटेड, बस आउटडेटेड ही नहीं हुआ था बट ऑल्सो प्रोवाइड पनिशमेंट्स which are not commensurate with the offense and financial benefits that occur from poaching and trade in wildlife produce. So जो existing laws था वो बस आउटडेटेड ही नहीं हुआ था, जो पनिशमेंट प्रोवाइड होता था वो इनफ नहीं था with the offense. Okay? Further, such laws mainly relate to the control of hunting and do not emphasize the other factors which are also prime reason for the decline of India's wildlife, namely taxidermy and trade in wildlife products therefrom. So further such laws, वो जो laws था mainly relate to control of hunting, वो सब बस कंट्रोल ऑफ हंटिंग के रिलेट था एंड डू नॉट एम्फसाइज द अदर फैक्टर्स विच आर ऑल्सो द प्राइम रीजन फॉर डिक्लाइन इंडियाज वाइल्ड लाइफ, namely taxidermy and trade in wild products therefrom. So taxidermy is if a person use the animal skin as showpiece. So this is taxidermy. Now moving forward to the salient features of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So Wildlife Protection of 1972 जो था is a product of process which started long ago in 1887 for the protection of few wild birds after addition of wild animals 1912 and specified plants in 1919. So 1972 जो था वो प्रोडक्ट ऑफ प्रोसेस है. तो फर्स्ट क्या था 1887 से स्टार्ट हुआ था फॉर द प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ फ्यू वर्ल्ड बर्ड्स, देन ऐड हुआ था वाइल्ड एनिमल्स 1912 में एंड देन स्पेसिफाइड प्लांट 1919 में. सो बाय दिस इट कवर्ड ऑलमोस्ट ऑल द वाइल्ड लाइफ रिसोर्स व्हिच नीड प्रोटेक्शन एंड मैनेजमेंट. नेक्स्ट इज द रेटिंग ऑफ शेड्यूल 1 to 5 is in accordance with the risk of survival of wildlife enlisted in them. So Schedule 1 provide very much protection and the protection is reduced from 1 to 5. Okay, animals include schedules are prohibited for total protection from hunting and the trade of commerce related to such animals are strictly regulated. So जो सब एनिमल ये शेड्यूल 1 to 5 में रहेगा, सो दे आर टोटली प्रोटेक्टेड फ्रॉम हंटिंग एंड ट्रेड एंड कॉमर्स रिलेटेड टू सच एनिमल्स आर स्ट्रिक्टली रेगुलेटेड. द शेड्यूल 6 हैज बीन एडेड to include the specified plant species to be protected by Wildlife Protection Amendment Act of 1991. An expert committee constituted by the Indian Board of Wildlife considers amendment to the act as when necessary. So एक expert committee बनाया गया था by the Indian Board of Wildlife consider amendment to the act as and when necessary. With the amendment of the Act of 1991, powers of the state government have been withdrawn almost totally. So when amendment of 1991 placed, so the power of state government जो था वो withdrawn किया गया almost totally. Now the state government are not empowered to declare wild animal as a vermin. Very important. So now the state government are not empowered to declare the wild animal as a harmful, that is as a vermin. Further, by addition of provision, immunization of livestock within a radius of 5 km from national park or sanctuary has been made compulsory. So Immunization of livestock. Livestock means the asset for animal within a radius of 5 km from a national park or sanctuary has been made compulsory. Now, what is management effective evaluation? So, MEE conducted by National Tiger Conservation Authority and Wildlife Institution of India is the assessment of how well protected areas are being managed and their effectiveness in conserving target flora and fauna. The reserves were put in 4 categories: very good, good, fair and poor. Now moving forward to Environment Protection Act of 1986. As compared to all other previous laws on environment protection, the Environment Protection Act 1986 is a more effective and bold measure to fight the problem of pollution. So 1986 is more effective and bold to fight the problem of pollution. Now the genesis of Environmental Protection Act of 1986 is in Article 48A. 48A is Directive Principle of State Policy, and Article 51A Clause G, that is Fundamental Duties of Indian Constitution. The Act empowers the central government to take all appropriate measures to prevent and control pollution and to establish effective machinery for the purpose of protecting and improving the quality of environment and the protecting, controlling and abating environmental pollution. So this act empowered the central government that they can take all the appropriate measures to prevent and control pollution and to establish effective machinery for the purpose of protecting and improving the quality of environment and protecting, controlling and abating environment pollution. Now, the central government or any other person duly authorized, means authorized is completely authorized, is empowered to collect the samples of air, water, soil and or other substances as evidence of the offence under the Environmental Protection Act of 1986. So, as evidence of offence under Environment Protection Act, one person or the central government duly authorized is empowered to collect the sample of air, water, soil and other substance from the environment. Now the Act prescribes a special procedure for handling hazardous substances, and the concerned person has to handle the hazardous substances according to the procedure of the Act. The Environment Protection Act of 1986 has relaxed the rule of locus standi. So locus standi means right to appear in a court or before anybody on a given question. So the Environment Protection Act 1986 has relaxed the rule of locus standi, and because of such relaxation, even a common citizen can appear the court provided he has given a notice of 60 days. So before appearing court, he has given a notice of 60 days of the alleged offence and his intention to make complaint to the central government or any other competent authority. The Act empowers and authorizes the central government to issue direction for the operation or process, prohibition, closure or regulation of any industry. The central government is also authorized to stop, regulate and supply of electricity and water or any other service directly without obtaining the order of court in this regard. So ये जो एक्ट है वो एम्पावर कर रहा है एंड ऑथराइजेशन दे रहा है टू द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट टू इशू डायरेक्शन फॉर द ऑपरेशन और प्रोसेस, प्रोहिबिशन, क्लोजर और रेगुलेशन ऑफ एनी इंडस्ट्री. The central government is also authorized to stop, regulate supply of electricity or water or any other service directly without obtaining the order of the court in this regard. Now the Act consists of and deals with more stringent penal provision. So what is the minimum penalty? The minimum penalty for contravention or violation of any provision of the law is an imprisonment for a term which may be extended up to the 5 years or fine up to 1 lakh rupees or both. Okay, so the minimum penalty for the contravention of violation of any provision of the law is, first is imprisonment extended up to 5 years, next fine up to 1 lakh or both. The Act also provides for the further penalty if the failure or contravention continues after the date of conviction. It is rupees 5,000 per day. Okay, if the failure of contravention continues beyond the period of 1 year, then offender is punished with the imprisonment of a term which may extend 7 years. Very important. Next is the Environment Protection Act of 1986 grants immunity to the officer of the government for any act done under the provision of this act and under the powers vested in them or function assigned to them under this act. So, the Environment Protection Act of 1986 grants immunity to the officer of the government for any act done under the provision of this act or under powers vested in them or function assigned to them under the act. The act diverts the civil courts, means the act cancel out the civil courts from the having any jurisdiction to entertain any suit or proceeding in respect of an action, direction, order issued by central government or other statutory authority under this act. Under the act, there will be supremacy of provision. It means that ये जो provision है वो बाकी कोई भी एक्ट के साथ अगर conflict situation हो जाए तो इस एक्ट का provision को supreme माना जाएगा. In other words, the provision of this act and the rules or orders made under this act shall have effect and supremacy over anything inconsistent contained in any enactment other than this act. Okay? Now moving forward to the National Forest Policy of 1988. The principal aim of National Forest Policy of 1988 is to ensure environmental stability and maintenance of ecological balance, including atmospheric equilibrium, which are vital for sustenance of all life forms, human, animal and plant. So, here the principal aim of National Forest Policy of 1988 is to ensure environmental stability. Okay? So, ensure karna environmental stability and maintain karna of ecological balance, including atmospheric equilibrium, which are vital for sustenance of all life forms, human, animal and plants. So, the objective of National Forest Policy of 1988 is conserving the natural heritage of the country by preserving the remaining natural forest with the vast variety of flora and fauna, which represent the remarkable biological diversity and genetic resources of the country. So, first objective is to conserve the natural heritage of the country. Okay? By preserving the remaining natural forest जितना भी है उसको प्रिजर्व करने के बाद with the vast variety of flora and fauna, flora means plant and fauna means animals, so उसको भी protect करने का ज़रूरत है, which represent the remarkable biological diversity and genetic resources of the country. Next, checking the soil erosion and denudation in catchment areas of rivers, lakes, reservoirs in the interest of soil and water conservation, for mitigation flood and droughts, for the retardation of siltation of reservoirs. Okay, so soil erosion and denudation in the catchment areas of river, lakes, reservoirs, ये चेक करना होगा. Why? In the interest of soil and water conservation, for mitigation flood and droughts, and for the retardation of siltation of reservoirs. Now, checking the extension of sand dunes in the desert areas of Rajasthan along with coastal tracts. Okay, checking the extension of sand dunes in the desert areas of Rajasthan and along with coastal tracts. Increasing substantially the forest or tree cover in the country through the massive afforestation and social forestry program, especially on the all denuded and degraded and unproductive lands. Again, I am saying that increase करना होगा substantially the forest and tree cover in the country through a massive afforestation and social forestry programs, especially on denuded, degraded, and unproductive lands. Now next, increasing the productivity of forest to meet essential national needs. So increasing the productivity of forest. Why? To meet the essential national needs. Next is encouraging the efficient utilization of forest produce and maximizing the substitution of wood. Okay. So the major achievement of National Forest Policy in 1988 is first to increase in forest and tree cover. Okay. So after implementation of Forest Policy 1988, there is seen the increase in the forest and tree cover. Next, involvement of local communities in the protection, conservation and management of forest through the Joint Forest Management Act. Very important. Under the Act, there will be supremacy of provision. It means that ये जो provision है वो बाकी कोई भी एक्ट के साथ अगर conflict situation हो जाए तो इस एक्ट का provision को सुप्रीम माना जाएगा. इन अदर वर्ड्स द प्रोविजन ऑफ दिस एक्ट एंड द रूल्स और ऑर्डर्स मेड अंडर दिस एक्ट shall have effect and supremacy over anything inconsistent contained in any enactment other than this act. Okay. So meeting the requirement of fuel wood, fodder, minor forest produce and small timber of the rural and tribal population. Rural and tribal population depends on fuel wood. Fodder means the food for animal, minor forest produce and small timber, that is small wood, for meeting the requirement of fuel wood, fodder, minor forest produce and small timber of the rural and tribal population. Now next, the conservation of biological diversity and genetic resources of the country through ex situ and in situ conservation measure. Very important that conservation of biological diversity and genetic resources of the country through ex situ and in situ conservation measures. Now significant of the contribution in maintenance of the environment and ecological stability in the country. Last is the significant contribution in maintenance of environment and ecological stability in the country. Now moving forward to the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. So Biological Diversity Act 2002 was born out of India's attempt to realize the objective. कौन सा objective? Enshrined in the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity 1992, that is United Nations CBD, which recognizes the sovereign rights of state to use their own biological resources. That state can use their own biological resource. Okay. So an act to provide for conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of its component, fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of use of biological resources, knowledge and for matters of connected therewith and incidental thereto. So ये act जो है ये fair and equitable share का बात बोलता है. What is equitable sharing? So equitable sharing and equal sharing are different. So suppose there are two person. One person is A and second person is B. A is very rich and B is very poor. Suppose I gave A and B both 100 rupees. So that is equal sharing. And if I give A, who is very rich, 100 rupees and B 300 rupees to make the balance. Okay. So this is फेयर शेयरिंग और इक्विटेबल शेयरिंग. ठीक है. तो ये एक्ट प्रोवाइड करता है फॉर कंजर्वेशन ऑफ बायोलॉजिकल डाइवर्सिटी, सस्टेनेबल यूज ऑफ इट्स कंपोनेंट्स, फेयर एंड इक्विटेबल शेयरिंग ऑफ द बेनिफिट्स अराइजिंग आउट ऑफ use of biological resources, knowledge and for matters connected therewith and incidental thereto. So objective of this act are first conservation of biological diversity, next sustainable use of its components, and next fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resource. So first objective is conservation the biological diversity. Second is sustainable use of its component. Third is fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resource. ये जो एक्ट है, दिस एक्ट इन्विजेक्स अ 3-tier स्ट्रक्चर, एक 3-tier स्ट्रक्चर फॉर्म करता है टू रेगुलेट एक्सेस टू बायोलॉजिकल रिसोर्सेज. नेशनल लेवल में है नेशनल बायोडाइवर्सिटी अथॉरिटी, दैट इज एनबीए. स्टेट लेवल में है स्टेट बायोडाइवर्सिटी बोर्ड्स, दैट इज एसबीबी. एंड लोकल लेवल में बायोडाइवर्सिटी मैनेजमेंट कमिटी, दैट इज बीएमसी. ओके, so the Wildlife Institute of India has recommended notification of the areas above wildlife sanctuaries as a silent zone. So the areas above the wildlife sanctuaries is declared as silent zone by Wildlife Institute of India by keeping the noise level of helicopter within the limit of 50 डेसिबल. वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, हेलीकॉप्टर का जो नॉइज लेवल है वो रिड्यूस करके 50 डेसिबल कर दिया गया बिकॉज द एरियाज इज कॉल्ड एज साइलेंट जोन. सो दिस रिकमेंडेशन in WII's interim report with regard to height and noise level for flights over Kedarnath Wildlife Sanctuary. So an example is Kedarnath Wildlife Sanctuaries. So thank you for watching. In next video I will cover the scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers, recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006 and rest. So stay tuned for next video. Thank you.